Heather and Matt thought they'd buried Joan quietly, just the aging mother-in-law with nowhere else to go. But when the foreclosure letter arrived, Joan wasn't crying. She was smiling. She was the one who funded their house, the one they mocked, the one they locked out. Now she stood across the street watching her son and his wife lose everything. Eviction, Heather whispered, shaken. From her. Yes, because the woman they sidelined was never just family. She was the founder. They gave me a plastic fork and a folding chair and smiled like I should be grateful. The plastic fork snapped on the first bite of overcooked chicken. Joan didn't say anything. She simply picked up the broken piece, set it gently on the paper plate, and reached for a napkin. No one noticed. Not Matt, not Heather, not even the toddler who had smeared chocolate frosting on her cardigan 20 minutes earlier. They were too busy laughing by the wine cart, too busy clinking real glasses to hear the silence pooling around her folding chair. She glanced at the banner strung over the dining table. Happy birthday, Mom. Except Mom was crossed out, replaced by a glittery cutout that read, Heather's Garden Party. The cake had flowers on it, Heather's favorite, not hers. Joan hated fondant. Joan, Heather called sweetly across the yard, loud enough for the dozen guests to hear. Do you need help cutting your food? Laughter rippled. Someone coughed to cover it. Someone else murmured, She's still sharp, right? Joan smiled thinly, folding her hands in her lap. No, dear, just waiting for a sharper fork. Matt was pretending not to hear. He refilled drinks, like a man auditioning for someone else's life. The lawn was green, the sunlight warm, the string lights already warming up for the evening's aesthetic. But to Joan, everything smelled like citrus cleaner and borrowed dignity. Her chair wobbled slightly every time she shifted her weight. It didn't match the others. They hadn't even bothered with symmetry. Her gaze moved past the laughter, past the champagne flutes, and rested on the house. Their house. Colonial, 2 stories, white shutters with blue trim. The porch swing still creaked like it had back in '98, the year they almost lost everything. Back then, Matt had lost his job. Heather was pregnant and panicked. They had called Joan in tears. She'd written a check for $60,000 the same week. Not a loan, she'd said, a lifeline. Her retirement plan could wait. Family came first. They'd signed an agreement, of course. Nothing formal, just a notarized addendum to the home deed, acknowledging her contribution and promising lifetime care. She'd even kept a copy, tucked away like a relic of trust. That trust now sat on a plastic plate with a smear of off-brand coleslaw. Joan, honey, Heather's voice cooed again, artificially sweet. Could you make yourself useful and help bring out the dessert plates? Joan blinked. Her birthday cake, and she was being asked to serve it. The absurdity almost made her laugh. She stood slowly, letting her knees crack loud enough to silence a conversation or two. Her legs trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from restraint. In the kitchen, she found the dessert plates on the counter, disposable again, the kind that bent under the weight of anything more than a cookie. She stared at them, motionless. In the corner of the kitchen, an old drawer stuck out slightly, one of the few things that hadn't been renovated. The brass knob was still tarnished, still loose. Joan reached for it. Inside, past the expired coupons and takeout menus, her hand found the folded envelope she'd hidden years ago. The addendum, yellowed but intact. Her signature, Matt's, witnessed and stamped. She ran a thumb across the paper, felt the weight of every ignored favor, every passive-aggressive remark, every time she'd been handed the leftovers from a life she once funded. From the backyard, she heard Heather laugh again, loud and gleaming, like everything she touched belonged to her by divine right. Joan tucked the envelope into her cardigan pocket. For now, she said nothing. There would be no scene, no confrontation, just silence and leverage. She stepped back outside with the plates. Heather didn't thank her. Matt didn't look her way. But Joan smiled more to herself than anyone else. She now remembered something Heather clearly didn't. The deed might not have her name on the mailbox, but it was still printed on paper that mattered. She retrieved her copy of the deed addendum. They hung up a happy birthday sign, but never asked how I was really doing. Joan sat at the edge of her bed, the corners of the deed addendum brushing against her palm like a secret she wasn't ready to share. Outside her window, she could still hear the echo of party chatter winding down, the clink of wine bottles, the closing of car doors, the lazy laughter of people who didn't think twice about where their comfort came from. She stared at the photos on her dresser, Matt in his college graduation gown, Heather holding their first child, a family barbecue from a lifetime ago. All smiles. But what she remembered most wasn't the smiles. It was the phone call. It was late October 12 years ago. Rain had been hammering the siding when Matt's voice cracked over the line. Mom, I messed up. I got laid off and Heather's 6 months pregnant, and the bank's talking foreclosure. Joan hadn't hesitated. She didn't ask questions. She just got in her car, drove through the storm, and wrote a check for $60,000 from the inheritance her own mother had left behind. Matt promised, no, swore, that she'd always have a place in their home. A room of your own, he'd said. You won't ever have to worry, ever. The room was barely larger than a walk-in closet now. The floor creaked whenever she shifted her weight, the wallpaper peeled in one corner, and the baseboard heater whined during cold spells. Her clothes hung on a metal rack because Heather had claimed the closet space for seasonal storage. The walls were thin enough that Joan heard every late-night argument, every dismissive sigh when her name came up. Last week, she'd overheard Heather on the phone with a friend. She's mostly quiet, Heather had said, giggling a little. Confused sometimes, but she won't be around long anyway. Joan had stared at the ceiling, letting the words settle in her bones like dust. That afternoon, alone again after the party, she reached for the old filing box she kept under the bed, her version of a vault, receipts, letters, documents no one knew she still had. As she sifted through them, something new caught her eye. A crisp white envelope, not hers. It had the bank's logo in the top left corner. Her brows furrowed. She slid it open. Mortgage statement. Past due. Current balance, $407,800. Payment status delinquent, 3 months foreclosure warning. Enclosed, the words swam for a second, disbelief clouding her vision. She flipped through the stapled pages, late fees, missed payments, refinancing attempts, all dated over the past 6 months. 6 months while Heather was shopping for high-end patio furniture and hosting wine tastings for her book club. Joan's grip tightened on the paper. Her eyes scanned faster, searching for something, anything, until she saw it. Her name, buried in the original mortgage transfer line, still listed as a private co-contributor with partial equity rights. They never removed her. She exhaled slowly, letting the paper fall into her lap. It all made sense now. The cold stares, the casual disrespect. Heather treating her like an obstacle, not a person. Joan stood, the crinkle of the statement still echoing in the room. She crossed to the window and looked out toward the neighbor's house, the one with the for sale sign that had been up for months. That house had a porch swing too, and sunlight that poured through its kitchen bay window every morning. She didn't smile, not yet. Joan finds a mortgage statement with late notices. They bought new drapes but forgot the mortgage was due. The new velvet drapes cost more than Joan's monthly Social Security check. Heather stood proudly in the living room, wine in hand. Gives the house more elegance, she told her PTA friend. Matt says they're an investment. Joan sat quietly in her floral armchair, eyes closed, breathing slow. The air smelled like lavender and secrets. Oh, and the refinance is almost done, Heather whispered. If it's approved, we'll roll the car loan into the house. Joan didn't react, but behind closed eyes, her mind raced. Refinance? The house was already in default. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Joan opened her laptop. Heather thought she didn't know how. She searched private financial consultants near me. By morning, she had an appointment. She told Matt she was seeing a doctor. He didn't look up from ski trip listings. The consultant, Celeste, in a sharp blazer and glasses, studied Joan's mortgage and deed papers. You're still a co-financier, she said. Unless you signed away your rights, you legally own part of the house. I haven't, Joan replied. Then refinancing without your consent may be fraud. Also, 2 credit lines are tied to the property, maxed out. One in Matt's name, one in Heather's. Joan's stomach turned. Celeste looked up. This house is bleeding money, Ms. Carson. And if they default while you're still legally tied to it, the creditors could come knocking on your door, too. How soon could they try refinancing again? She asked. If they haven't submitted documents already, probably within the month. But the moment you notify the lender that you retain rights, everything changes. You can block them. Joan nodded slowly. Her thoughts weren't frantic now. They were deliberate, focused. I'll need a full breakdown of what I can legally do, she said. And I want everything you just told me in writing. Celeste smiled. I'll draft it tonight. That night, Joan returned home to find Heather in the living room, rearranging decorative pillows on the new sectional sofa. Sleep okay? Heather asked without looking at her. Like a rock, Joan replied, walking past her, calm as still water. She climbed the stairs, one step at a time, each creak of the floorboards beneath her feet echoing like confirmation. In her room, she pulled out the deed again and sat beneath the old lamp with its faded shade. She traced the line where her name appeared. Clearly, undeniably, legally. They had spent money they didn't have to impress people who didn't care. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. She still held the pen that could erase the illusion. Joan's name still has legal leverage on the original loan. They called me a guest, but guests don't pay property taxes. Joan sat frozen at the kitchen island staring at the brochure that had been left carelessly or cruelly on the granite counter. A 4-day adults-only Caribbean cruise with ocean view rooms, unlimited drinks, and private snorkeling excursions. Heather's voice echoed from the living room, light and syrupy. We booked the premium cabin. Matt got the last-minute upgrade with points. Oh, and we used Joan's American Express. She never checks it. Laughter followed. Not Joan's. Joan's fingers curled around the brochure. Vacations used to mean postcards, not passwords. Matt once called her from college just to talk. Now she wasn't even told about the cruise, one she was unknowingly funding. She checked her wallet. Her card was still there, untouched. Heather had memorized it. The house was quiet, Heather out on errands, Matt at soccer with the kids. Joan went upstairs, closed her door, and opened a hidden drawer. Inside was a tiny black camera she'd ordered weeks ago. No hesitation. That night, over dinner, she smiled politely while Heather and Matt chatted about packing. Inside, she was listening. 3 nights later, the camera caught it. Heather on Joan's bed with a friend, wine glass in hand. She's harmless, still thinks Matt will take care of her. I can't wait until the will stuff sorts itself out. She's been living here like she owns the place. Her friend laughed. Does she even have a will? Heather smirked. Not that it matters. We've made sure she wouldn't know who to trust even if she wanted to. She still sends Christmas cards to people who ghosted her 20 years ago. Joan had heard enough. Joan watched the footage on her laptop, each word cutting deeper than the last. Her heart wasn't broken, it was focused. The next morning, she called her lawyer, the same one who had helped draft her loan addendum years ago. They hadn't spoken in a while, but he remembered her immediately. I need to know something, she said. If I can prove financial misuse and emotional neglect, does my deed addendum still give me power? He didn't hesitate. Email me everything. If what you say checks out, yes, you absolutely have grounds. More than that. That night, Joan sat in the backyard alone, her phone screen glowing in the darkness. An email lit up her inbox. Subject, urgent, property addendum, from Michael T. Green, Esker, message, Joan, I've reviewed the documents. Yes, you have grounds to act, and soon. A breeze stirred the new drapes, visible through the glass door, their elegant folds now heavy with irony. Heather thought Joan was fading, forgotten, foolish, and outmatched. But Joan wasn't a guest here. She was the architect of everything, and she had just found the switch that could tear the walls down. Her lawyer's email confirmed, yes, you have grounds. They served steak. I got microwave soup in a mug. Joan starts transferring assets into a trust they know nothing about. The sizzle of steak hit the cast iron skillet like applause. Garlic butter foamed at the edges, rosemary crackling in the heat. The smell drifted upstairs, rich and indulgent, curling into Joan's room like a cruel invitation. No one called her down. She waited anyway, listening to the clink of silverware and the swell of music downstairs. Every now and then, Heather's laugh rang out, sharp, exaggerated, meant to be heard, meant to exclude. Finally, just after 7:30, there was a knock, not on her door, but on the wall. 2 soft taps, like a pity alert. Joan opened her door to find a tray on the floor, a mug of microwave soup, still spinning slightly from the reheating. No spoon, no napkin. She picked it up slowly, letting the heat soak into her palms, then walked back to her chair and sat by the window. Down below, she could see the dinner party in full swing. Heather had strung fairy lights between the hedges. Matt stood by the grill with a beer in hand, laughing with neighbors. Someone toasted to good fortune and fresh starts. Joan took a slow sip from her mug. The broth was watery and lukewarm, the kind Heather stocked in bulk when the pandemic hit and never rotated out. Still, she drank it, every last drop. She had work to do. 3 days later, Joan sat in a notary office, downtown, flanked by her lawyer and a witness. Her hands moved steadily, deliberately, as she signed the final page of the trust documents. The name of the trust was simple, discreet, the Carson Preservation Trust. Everything, her remaining equity stake in the house, her dormant investment account, even her life insurance, was now under its umbrella, irrevocable, hidden from anyone who didn't know where to look. "They'll never know about this?" she asked, looking at her lawyer. He gave a short nod. "Unless you tell them, or they try to contest you in court, they won't see a thing." Joan smiled politely. Heather didn't believe in reading the fine print. Matt only read things when they were printed in bold. Later that week, Heather hosted another gathering, a wine and cheese mixer for the Neighborhood Beautification Committee. Joan wasn't invited, of course. She watched through the window as guests arrived in pastel cardigans and linen slacks. Wine glasses passed like communion. This time, Joan didn't bother pretending to be asleep. She slipped out the back, called her banker from the garden bench, and confirmed it. "Freeze all linked cards," she said. "Any recurring charges, cancel them. If Heather or Matt call, route them to me." The banker hesitated. "That will cause confusion." "I'm counting on it." She hung up and walked back inside, just as Heather came into the kitchen for more brie. Their eyes met. Heather gave a tight smile. "Everything okay?" she asked. Joan nodded. "Oh, yes. Just enjoying the evening air." Heather opened the fridge, paused, then looked back. "You know, if you ever feel like you want to contribute to the party budget, I'll let you know," Joan said gently. "But I think I've already given quite a bit." Heather blinked. Joan walked past her, not waiting for a response. The next morning, Joan logged into her brokerage account and did something she hadn't touched in 15 years. She liquidated her dormant investment fund. It wasn't huge, but it was enough. More than enough. She stared at the screen as the balance updated. It felt like blood returning to a sleeping limb. Then she made the call. "Hi, yes, I'd like to open escrow. 314 Briarwood Drive, across the street. Full cash offer." The agent was stunned. "Are you sure? That place has been sitting for months." "I'm sure. Make it quiet. No flyers, no signage." She hung up and walked to the window. Heather was across the street, pruning her hydrangeas with exaggerated care. She looked up. Joan smiled and waved. Heather waved back, distracted, assuming she was still winning. "She opens escrow on the house they've been eyeing across the street. They told the guests I had memory issues. I remembered every word. The doorknob didn't budge. Joan twisted it once more, slower this time, the metal cool and stubborn beneath her palm. She knocked lightly at first, then again, firmer. Laughter floated from the backyard. Glass clinks, chairs scraping on pavers, someone squealing at a bug, but no one came. She stepped back and looked around. The side gate was latched from the inside, and the front door was still locked. Her gardening gloves were still damp from the azaleas she'd trimmed earlier, and a smear of soil now streaked the hem of her blouse. She knocked again, louder, nothing. Through the window, she could see Heather pouring sangria into mason jars, surrounded by smiling faces. Joan's seat at the table was missing. There were exactly 8 chairs for 9 people. They knew I was outside. She stepped back from the door and sat on the porch bench, her breath steady. A slight breeze brushed against her cheeks, the scent of marinated meat mixed with jasmine from the neighbor's yard. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to rest, but to remember. This wasn't the first time. 2 weeks ago, she had gone to retrieve mail and returned to a bolted door. Heather had said it was muscle memory from locking up at night. A few days later, the thermostat in her room had been turned down to 60. When Joan mentioned it, Matt laughed. "Maybe you did it by accident, Mom. You've been forgetful lately, huh?" Joan had smiled then, too. She'd nodded, murmured something vague, let them build their little narrative, brick by gaslit brick. But every incident went in her file, a leather-bound notebook beneath her mattress, each entry dated and detailed. The locked door would have its place, too. Eventually, someone opened the back door. It was Heather, cheeks flushed and annoyed. "Oh, Joan, we didn't realize you were out here." Joan blinked. "I must have gotten turned around." Heather waved her inside, her voice syrupy. "You know how these old latches are. Sticky things." Joan nodded. "It's all right, I forget things." That evening, the party faded into quiet chatter and phone screens. Joan sat in the corner, knitting needles clicking, seemingly lost in her yarn, but listening. By the fire pit, Matt spoke to a cologne-soaked neighbor. "She's slipping, keeps repeating stories, forgets the day." The man chuckled. "Time for memory care?" "Heather's already thinking about it. We just need to guide her there," Matt said casually. Joan's hands froze mid-stitch. Without looking, she opened her phone and hit record. Matt's voice, the fire, the clinking glasses, it was all there. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. Like she was an old chair they didn't want but didn't know how to toss. She waited until the guests left. Then, in her room, she played the recording twice. No tears. She uploaded the file to a private drive, labeled it Evidence UO1. The next morning, Matt asked, "Sleep okay?" "Fine," Joan smiled, "though I think I misplaced my Sunday pills again." He chuckled. "You've always had a system." She nodded. "Let's hope I don't forget it." They forgot I was the reason the roof doesn't leak. The banker stared at the screen for a long time before speaking, his eyes flicking between the monitor and Joan, clearly unsure whether he should be surprised, impressed, or terrified. "I'll be honest, Ms. Carson," he said finally, folding his hands. "We don't often see original backers walk through that door after, 13 years?" 14, Joan corrected gently, her voice calm. "I remember because the roof caved that same summer. I was the reason they could fix it." She pulled a file from her purse and slid it across the desk. Inside were copies, dated and notarized, of the loan agreement and the original check receipt, $60,000. Her savings, her safety net, drained for a promise. The banker, Mark, adjusted his tie. "And you believe the property is being mismanaged?" "I don't believe it," Joan said, her gaze cool. "I know it." He clicked a few keys, pulled up the file. Joan leaned forward just enough to see the screen. The house was still under her legal name, not as sole owner, but as primary silent contributor. Her credit had never been removed from the loan structure. She hadn't even realized how exposed she still was. Mark frowned. "There was a refinancing request just last week. Odd timing. And interesting." He clicked again. "What is it?" "Your signature appears on these documents, or at least someone's version of it." Joan's heart stopped, but her face didn't flinch. "Forgery?" He turned the screen slightly. "Not just yours. Your birth date's wrong, your retirement status is listed as dependent, and this new request inflates household income by nearly 40%. Joan let the silence stretch before replying, "Do you see now why I'm here?" Mark gave a tight nod. "We'll need to flag the application immediately and open a fraud investigation. You'll need to formally declare these documents invalid." Joan nodded, already retrieving a pen. "I'll sign whatever I need." As she wrote, the old anger didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was a different emotion now, sharper, quieter, something closer to strategy. Heather must have thought she could outmaneuver paper trails and digital systems, forgetting that Joan had built the very foundation of the home they now occupied. She was the ground beneath their feet, and the ground was shifting. Mark continued typing. "You'll also have the right to freeze all financial movement tied to this asset during the investigation. It won't stop them from trying to refinance elsewhere, but it'll block this route." Joan thought of the new car Heather had been test driving last week, the luxury catalog in the recycling bin, the designer handbag that still had its tag tucked under the flap. They were spending forward already, counting the money they thought was coming. "Freeze it," she said. "All of it. Every route they could possibly use from this bank." Mark hesitated. "You understand that might escalate things." Joan smiled, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Let them escalate. I've been silent for 14 years. That's long enough. That evening, Heather stood in the hallway, muttering into her phone. What do you mean there's a problem with the application? I triple-checked the forms. No, she doesn't have access anymore. She can't. We made sure. Joan passed behind her slowly, not stopping, not speaking. Heather didn't even notice. But Joan heard it all. Later in her room, she recorded another memo, her voice calm, precise. June 14th. Forged refinance request caught. Bank contacted. Freeze confirmed. She closed the file, backed it up, and exhaled. They had written her off like an old receipt, but now she was the one auditing the books. Joan instructs the bank to block all activity. They decorated for a holiday while I prepared for a foreclosure. The front porch was a festival of distraction. Giant, inflatable pumpkins bobbed in the breeze, surrounded by hand-painted signs that read Harvest Blessings and Give Thanks. Heather had even ordered fake hay bales, artfully arranged beside a new autumn-themed wreath, $129 price tag still tucked. Under the ribbon Joan spotted as she stepped inside with her grocery tote, invisible as usual. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon candles and too much ambition. Orange and burgundy garlands framed every window. A centerpiece of miniature pumpkins sat on the dining table, right beside a brand new glass sculpture that looked suspiciously Murano. Joan's eyes moved like a scanner, new throw pillows on the couch, a limited edition Dutch oven on the stove that had never been used, a gleaming espresso machine on the counter still blinking with a startup tutorial, all of it glittering with a kind of desperation. Joan didn't touch anything. She just walked slowly, camera phone in hand, snapping casual photos, close-ups of high-end brand tags, luxury items, receipts left out like crumbs. Getting into photography now? Heather's voice floated in from the hallway. Joan turned with a mild smile. Just trying to appreciate the decor. Heather twirled once, showcasing her newest purchase, a deep green designer handbag with gold hardware. Matt surprised me. Isn't it gorgeous? Limited edition. We got it on promo, with points. Joan raised an eyebrow. Must have been quite the promo. Heather didn't catch the tone. She flounced away, humming to herself. Later that afternoon, Joan sat in the kitchen while Matt brewed coffee from the new machine, fumbling with the touchscreen like a man trying to impress himself. He placed a mug in front of her. Thanks, she said. Matt lingered, hands on the counter. His tone was casual. Too casual. Hey, we've had a few things pop up financially. You know how it is. School supplies, property tax, car stuff. Joan sipped slowly, letting him flounder in the pause. He continued, we were wondering if you might be able to float us just a little help. Temporarily, just to smooth things out. Joan looked at him over the rim of her cup. His eyes darted once toward the hallway as if making sure Heather wasn't eavesdropping. How much is a little? Matt gave a dry laugh. I mean, a couple grand would really ease some pressure, maybe 3, 4. Joan set the cup down gently. I thought the refinance would have solved all that. His face twitched just for a moment. That didn't pan out. Technical stuff. Bank said it's under review. I see, she gave him a grandmotherly smile. And what would this be for, specifically? He hesitated. Bills, house things. Joan nodded as if considering it. You'll be getting something in the mail soon. Matt's brows lifted slightly. Oh? Her smile stayed soft, impenetrable. Just house things. She stood, collected her cup, and walked it to the sink. That evening, alone in her room, Joan uploaded the photos to her secure drive. She attached them to an email addressed to her attorney and the mortgage auditor, and typed, Subject, excessive spending. While delinquent, documentation enclosed. Before she hit send, she reread the final line she'd written. They decorated for a holiday while I prepared for a foreclosure. She hit send. The next morning, Heather was at the mailbox in her robe, flipping through envelopes with mild disinterest. Joan watched from the upstairs window as her fingers froze on a large white envelope. Her head tilted slightly. She turned toward the house, slower now, like someone who had just realized the porch decorations were the only thing holding the place together. Joan smiled. Oh, you'll be getting something in the mail. The same hands that served me a paper plate now trembled at an envelope. The envelope wasn't large. No red stamps, no dramatic warnings. just plain white and quiet, like a storm cloud before the thunder. Matt opened the front door to grab the morning mail and nearly missed it, tucked between a gardening catalog and a coupon booklet. He squinted, flipped it over, and paused. The logo in the top left corner hit him like a gut punch. First Horizon Mortgage and Lending. His stomach dropped. He tore it open, standing barefoot on the doormat, the cold tile forgotten beneath his feet. The first line wasn't a greeting. This letter serves as formal notification of impending foreclosure proceedings due to continued delinquency and unresolved fraud investigation associated with the property listed below. Matt read it twice, then a third time. His hands started to shake. From the kitchen, Heather called out, "Did the Halloween decor catalog come?" Matt didn't answer. Heather appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, her brows furrowed as she took in his expression. "What's wrong?" He handed her the letter without a word. She read silently, her mouth going dry. By the time she reached the signature at the bottom, her jaw had set in that sharp, angular line Joan knew so well. "There's no way," she hissed. "This has to be a mistake." Matt ran a hand through his hair, already calling the lender. At the table, Joan calmly sipped her tea and turned a newspaper page. Heather's voice rose. "We just got a foreclosure notice." "What?" "No, we weren't told it started." "Wait, what do you mean she moved her equity? Without telling us? This is our house." Joan met her gaze. Heather paled. Matt grabbed the phone. "There's a mistake. My mother lives here. We take care of her." Joan stood. "I warned you this would happen," she said, cool and even. She climbed the stairs, no drama, no rush. In her room, she packed what mattered: her gloves, trust papers, passport, her father's clock, and the cardigan Heather once regifted. One suitcase. Quiet, precise. Voices downstairs cracked into panic. "How long has she planned this?" Matt shouted. "I don't know," Heather snapped. "She's old, quiet. We didn't think—" They mistook silence for surrender. Joan opened her closet and found the hidden jewelry box, a brooch, old letters, and a brass key labeled 314. She slipped it into her pocket. The doorbell rang. Through the glass, a suited man with a briefcase. He didn't knock again. Joan descended, brushed past them. "Ms. Carson," the lawyer said, handing her the envelope. "Foreclosure documents, delivery confirmed." Joan turned to Matt, giving him the envelope. "The same hands that served me a paper plate," she said, "are trembling now." Then she walked out, suitcase in hand. She wasn't just foreclosing. She was reclaiming what was hers. The roast had been hot. The silence, colder. The roast sat untouched in the center of the table, steam curling from its browned edges like a final breath. Joan sat at the end, composed, her silverware neatly aligned, though she hadn't taken a bite. The dining room, once a space filled with clatter and chatter, had gone hollow. Every sound, Matt's forced throat clearing, Heather's nervous sipping, echoed louder than it should have. The silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. Joan finally set down her napkin. "Before this meal gets cold, we need to talk." Heather blinked. "Joan, can't we—" "No," Joan said gently, but with iron in her voice. "You've had your turn." She slid a thick manila folder across the table. It landed in front of Matt with a soft thud, but the weight it carried was seismic. Inside were copies of every document they thought she'd forgotten, every signature they never expected her to keep. Matt opened it with trembling fingers, his eyes scanned quickly, then desperately. "What is this?" Joan poured herself a glass of water. "The contract you both signed when I gave you the $60,000, the original home equity clause. And this," she tapped the corner of a highlighted paragraph, "is what you apparently never read." Heather leaned over, squinting. "What clause?" Joan smiled faintly. "The abuse-triggered reversion clause. My lawyer had it included when you insisted on a lifetime care agreement. It states that if I'm subjected to financial misuse, neglect, or emotional harm within the residence I helped purchase, I have legal right to reclaim my share or full ownership, depending on severity." Heather let out a sharp laugh. "You can't be serious. That's enforceable." A voice interrupted from the hallway. Joan's attorney stepped into view, briefcase in hand, the same one who delivered the foreclosure paperwork days ago. "The clause has been reviewed and upheld." Given the recordings, the financial records, and eyewitness documentation, we're not pursuing partial recovery. We're executing a full asset claim. Matt stood red-faced. You can't just take our house. The attorney opened the briefcase, retrieved another envelope, and placed it calmly on the table. You already did, Joan said quietly. With every lie, every forged form, every time you left me outside, you gave it to me. Heather grabbed the envelope and ripped it open. Her face drained. 30 days? She whispered. You're evicting us? Matt looked like he might throw something. We'll fight this. We'll sue. This house is ours. Joan stood slowly, her hands calm, measured. No, Matt, it was ours. Then it became yours. Then it became your playground. Now it's mine again. Not out of revenge, but because I won't be erased. Heather's lip curled. You think this makes you a hero? Joan met her eyes, unwavering. I'm not interested in being a hero. Just a woman who finally picked up the pen instead of letting others write her ending. Outside, a delivery truck pulled up. Joan's belongings being moved to the house across the street, neatly labeled boxes, quiet dignity in motion. Joan walked to the doorway, her heels soft on the hardwood, then paused to look back at the dining room. The roast still steamed on the platter, but no one was hungry anymore. You should eat, she said. You'll need your strength. The clock starts today. She left them in silence, the kind too loud to speak over. Heather receives a 30-day eviction letter. The birthday banner was gone, so was the furniture. The echo of emptiness was the first thing Heather heard when she walked back inside. No hum of the refrigerator, no gentle creak of the antique dining chairs, no sound-absorbing throw rugs. The living room rang with the strange quiet of things missing. It took her a moment to register it. Then it hit like a slap. The furniture was gone. The couch, the solid oak dining table, the accent chairs with Joan's initials still sewn into the underside of the cushions. Even the mirror by the front door, the one Joan had hung herself 12 years ago, was stripped from the wall, leaving behind a ghostly outline in dust. Heather stumbled into the dining room and gasped. The table was completely gone. All that remained was a faint imprint on the hardwood, a shadow of where warmth and food and comfort used to live. The centerpiece pumpkin sat lonely on the floor. Across the street, Joan stood under the awning of her new front porch, clipboard in hand, watching the movers with quiet authority. Her slacks were pressed, her blouse crisp, her hair neatly pinned back. There was no smile on her face, just precision. Each item that had been hers was reclaimed with exact receipts, documentation, and timing. Hey, Heather shouted, storming outside, robe flapping. You took our furniture, Joan turned, expression unreadable. No, dear, I took my furniture. Every item I purchased was legally listed under my personal trust. You're welcome to file a dispute if you'd like to challenge the paper trail. Matt appeared behind Heather, breathless and sweaty, clearly having just realized the same. Joan, come on. This is spiteful. Joan raised a brow. You want to talk about spite, or should we talk about forged documents and locked doors? A few neighbors had stepped outside, watching the scene unfold with subtle curiosity. One couple whispered behind their mailbox. Another snapped a photo. Joan caught their eyes, nodded politely, then turned back to the movers. Careful with the lamp, she said gently. It's original Murano, the real kind. Matt's jaw clenched. Heather turned to storm back inside, but froze when a voice called from the sidewalk. Mail for 214. It was Mrs. Baines, the retired schoolteacher from 3 doors down, holding out a bundle of envelopes. This one came to our box by mistake. Heather snatched the stack. Thanks. Mrs. Baines hesitated. Big changes, huh? She said, glancing at Joan across the street. Heather didn't answer. She was too busy flipping through the stack. One envelope was different, cream-colored, elegant, no return address, just her name written in bold, neat cursive. She tore it open on the porch, Matt hovering behind her. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Joan Carson, last will and testament. Copy for personal record of Heather Green, witnessed and filed. Official, enforceable. Heather scanned the page, her hands tightening as her eyes raced down the lines. Joan had rewritten everything. Her estate, what remained of her accounts, her new home, even her legal rights to the rental property next door, all left to a foundation. Not family, not Matt, not Heather. a foundation created to support women over 60 facing financial abuse and displacement. Heather let out a bitter laugh that turned to a dry cough. She's giving it away, all of it, just to spite us. Across the street, Joan unpacked a small folding table onto her new porch. On it, 3 simple plates, a glass pitcher of lemonade, and sandwiches wrapped in parchment, a different kind of birthday table. One of her neighbors approached and sat with her, then another. Joan raised her glass, not to revenge, not to winning, but to something harder, rebuilding. Heather crumpled the letter in her fist, but her hands were trembling too much to tear it. They planned to control the party. I'd changed the venue and the list. The scent of lemon bars and roasted vegetables drifted down the street, pulling in neighbors like bees to lavender. Balloons, tasteful pale yellow, bobbed gently on Joan's newly painted front gate, and a chalkboard sign read, "Joan's Real Birthday. Come as you are." The folding chairs were mismatched. The drinks were chilled, but not fancy. The tablecloths were cotton, not linen. And yet everything shimmered with warmth in a way her former house, now a shell across the street, never had. Joan sat under a white canopy on the front lawn, the sun catching the delicate chain around her neck. Her smile wasn't performative, it was earned. Around her, the guests weren't clients or obligations. They were people who had known her before the loan, before the manipulation, before she became a ghost in her own home. Mrs. Baines brought her famous potato salad. Reggie from the post office played the guitar softly on the porch. A local teen Joan had tutored in math years ago stopped by with flowers. There were no paper plates this time, and Joan, she wasn't in the folding chair. She sat at the head of the table in a cushioned, high-backed seat upholstered just for her, the one Heather used to claim at every family dinner. That seat wasn't hers anymore, a voice murmured by the driveway, low, tight. She really threw herself a party. Heather. She stood just beyond the edge of the lawn, sunglasses on, arms crossed like armor, dressed in all black, like she'd arrived for a funeral. Hers or Joan's, no one could tell. Matt trailed behind her, less angry than embarrassed. He avoided eye contact, already shrinking under the weight of everything they'd lost. One of Joan's guests, Harriet, the former librarian with sharp eyes and sharper boundaries, noticed them first. She walked over without hesitation. "Private event," she said, blocking the path with her small frame. "Invite only?" Heather scoffed. "Are you serious? This is my mother-in-law's house." "Not anymore," Harriet said, calm as stone. "Now it's Joan's, and we don't let people crash who call her senile behind her back." Matt tried. "Joan, maybe we could just—" Joan rose slowly, not out of anger, but with the quiet authority of someone who had earned the right to stand tall. "Heather, Matt." Her voice was neither cold nor cruel. "You're not welcome here today." Heather smirked bitterly. "We supported you for years, Joan." Joan met her gaze. "You supported yourselves with my money, my name, and my silence." The words hung heavy in the summer air. Matt looked like he wanted to say something else, but then thought better of it. They turned and walked away, retreating to the house across the street, where cardboard boxes still sat in the windows like wounds. Back under the canopy, Joan lifted her glass. "I spent a long time being grateful just to be included," she said, her voice strong but soft. "Grateful to be tolerated, but today I'm celebrating what's earned. Not inherited, not borrowed, not manipulated, earned." A ripple of applause followed, glasses clinked, and she added with a small, satisfied smile, "In case anyone was wondering what's next, I've bought the property next door." Gasps, laughter. Someone shouted, "The one next to them?" Joan's eyes twinkled. "That's the one. I'm turning it into a short-term rental for women leaving complicated family situations." Reggie struck a proud chord on his guitar. Mrs. Baines raised her cup like it was a holy grail. Joan sat back down and picked up a small slice of birthday cake, chocolate, rich, real, the kind no one had served her in years. And this time, she didn't have to share it with people who only smiled when she wasn't looking. She reveals she's bought the property next to theirs as a rental. You can't buy respect or a reputation once it's gone. Joan donates part of the recovered equity to a women's legal fund for elder financial abuse victims. The silence at 214 Briarwood wasn't peaceful anymore. It was accusatory. Heather sat at the kitchen counter, surrounded by unopened bills, her laptop open to a blinking error screen. The bank login had locked her out again. The overdraft notice in her inbox read like a final insult. Across the street, wind chimes on Joan's porch sang lightly in the breeze. "Good news or bad?" Matt asked, standing in the doorway with a manila envelope. Heather didn't look up. "Neither." He dropped it on the counter. "Too bad. First Horizon finished their review. You're flagged for fraud." Heather froze. "What?" "You used Joan's income, assets, and forged her signature. They're reporting it to the credit bureaus and the DA." Her fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. Legal terms stared back, cold and final. "They're going to ruin my record," she whispered. Matt sank into a chair. "Mine's already ruined. My job offer's gone. Credit issues, ethics concerns. I was this close." His voice broke. Heather said nothing, just stared at the letter, hoping it might blink away. Meanwhile, at 316 Briarwood, Joan poured tea in her sunroom, her lawyer beside her. A folder with a blue seal lay on the table, Women's Equity and Legal Defense Fund. "You're sure?" he asked. Joan nodded. "A third of what I recovered, plus trust equity. For women like me, who gave, trusted, and paid for it." He smiled. "It'll help a lot of people." Joan looked out the window. "That's the point." Outside, Mrs. Baines watered her geraniums. A local student waved from the sidewalk. Life had moved on. Only those clinging to lies were drowning. The lawyer slid over another paper. "And the property transfer?" Joan picked up the pen. It felt light for what it carried. "Yes," she said. "Give the rental to the fund." "You're giving it away?" he asked. "I'm investing in freedom, mine and theirs." She signed. From the upstairs window at 214, Heather watched Joan smile. Not with revenge, with peace. "Why is she always winning?" Heather snapped. Matt didn't answer. He knew the truth. Joan hadn't won everything. She'd just stopped letting herself lose. That evening, Joan walked out to her garden. She knelt beside the lilies, planting fresh roots in the dirt she now owned without compromise. The sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the street. At her feet, the garden sign read, "Planted once, replanted stronger." She smiled. She signs one last transfer of ownership for the rental next door. No folding chair, no plastic plates, just peace. Morning light streamed through gauzy curtains onto Joan's breakfast table. No folding chairs, no paper plates, just real dishes, silverware, and quiet. For the first time in years, solitude felt peaceful, not lonely. After breakfast, Joan walked to the senior center, tote bag in hand. Inside, the hum of soft voices, rolling walkers, and the smell of coffee welcomed her. She stood by the whiteboard and smiled. "Today's topic," she said, writing in bold letters, "Know Your Worth. Estate planning and financial red flags." She had a voice now, not just for herself, but for others. By noon, she'd spoken with widows, divorcees, and one woman whose son was helping with her pension. Joan handed her a card. "No decisions without paperwork, no signatures without sleep," she said gently. Later at home, Joan wiped garden soil from her gloves and played a voicemail. Heather's voice cracked. "Joan, Matt's gone. I'm alone. I miss the holidays. I miss family. I know I don't deserve it, but can we talk?" Joan didn't react. She wrote a simple note. "Heather, thank you for your message. I wish you clarity and healing. Joan." No bitterness, no return invitation, just closure. Days later, pruning lavender, a young man appeared at her gate. "Ms. Carson? Nathaniel Reyes, American Stories. We're making a documentary on elder rights and financial abuse. Your name came up." Joan set down her shears. The breeze lifted the scent of herbs and fresh soil. "We've read court documents, watched the local coverage. Even some of your financial workshops went semi-viral on TikTok. People are calling you the quiet storm," he said with a smile. "We'd be honored to feature your story. It could help others, maybe thousands." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened her gate, motioned him toward the garden bench, and poured him a glass of water from the pitcher on the porch. I'll need to think about it, she said, settling across from him. I'm not interested in revenge narratives. We're not either, he said quickly. We're interested in women who rewrite endings. Joan looked out at the house across the street, once her cage, now someone else's echo. She turned back to him, calm and measured. I'll consider it, but only if I get to choose the table I speak from. He smiled. Absolutely. She sipped her water, thoughtful. For the first time in a long time, her story wasn't being taken, it was being offered. A documentary filmmaker requests her story. They served me shame, I served them justice. The screen faded from black to a slow pan of Joan's hands, weathered but steady, slicing into a lemon tart with practiced ease. The documentary opened not with tragedy, but with a question. What does it mean to be erased inside your own home? Joan's voice answered, calm and deliberate, layered over the footage. You start by folding your needs, then your opinions. Then one day someone hands you a paper plate at your own birthday, and you realize the table was never really yours. The final cut of Quiet Storm, the Joan Carson story, ran just under 47 minutes. It was supposed to stream to a niche audience on a social justice docuseries platform, but within 3 days, it went viral. Clips exploded on TikTok. A 2-minute snippet of Joan saying, I didn't want revenge, I wanted my name back, was viewed 4.8 million times in a week. Hashtags swarmed, Our Justice for Joan, Zixchigor paper plate, no more, Zix reclaim your seat. Email inboxes filled. The women's legal fund she'd donated to doubled in donations before the end of the month. Local media picked it up, then national. Joan, however, kept her routine simple. Her garden still needed watering, the senior center still needed mentors, and her dining table still had 4 chairs, no more, no less. But across town, things had changed. Heather adjusted the knob of the second-hand stove in her 1-bedroom rental. The gas flame hissed unevenly. The apartment was cramped with thin walls and a view of a chain-link fence. The television flickered behind her. Quiet Storm was streaming again. She muted it before Joan's voice could fill the room. Matt returned from a shift at a call center, his 4th job in 3 months. He tossed his badge on the counter and stared at the muted screen. She's a celebrity now, he muttered. Heather didn't respond, she couldn't. The shame had calcified into silence. The court hadn't pressed charges for fraud. Joan had declined to push for it. But the damage was irreversible. Their credit was wrecked. Their reputations burned down to the studs. The neighbors stopped waving back. At 316 Briarwood, Joan polished her grandmother's silverware. Each fork caught the light like a blade. The dining table, made from reclaimed maple wood, had been sanded, sealed, and built with her own money. No strings, no signatures. She lit 2 taper candles, poured a glass of red. No guests tonight, just her and the meal she'd prepared. She sat, unfolded a cloth napkin onto her lap, and placed the first bite of roasted chicken between her lips. Herbaceous, warm, perfectly seasoned. This time, no one interrupted, no one talked over her. She chewed slowly, savoring each second. Then a soft knock at the door. She paused, wiped her hands, and walked calmly to open it. Outside stood a teenage girl, nervous, holding a folder. Ms. Carson, she asked. I'm from Riverbrook High. We're doing a school project on people who made change in our community. My teacher said I should ask you for an interview. Joan smiled. Tell your teacher thank you. The girl blinked. So, does that mean yes? It means I'll think about it, Joan said warmly. But come back next week. I'll have cookies ready either way. As the girl walked down the path, Joan turned and looked once more at her table, crystal gleaming, plates neatly arranged, everything in place, everything hers. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, rattling the wind chimes. Inside, nothing moved without her say-so. She sat back down, lifted her glass, took another bite, and smiled. This year, I'll be celebrating with silverware and silence.